Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Perspectives on the News. My name is Diehl. I'm currently the Vice President of the Interreligious Council. On this morning's show, we're going to talk about hopefully an interesting and timely topic for many, and that is the pandemic's impact on the future of work. And here to discuss this topic with me, I have three very distinguished guests. And before we dive into it, I'd like you to just take a few seconds just to introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and why this topic is important to you.
Oh, good morning. My name is Dr. Alison Bianchi, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Criminology, as well as the director for the Center for the Study of Group Processes. So I'm interested in this topic because of group and corporate culture and how this will impact future work.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Albaugh. I work in the HR department at Frontier Co-op. We are a manufacturing company that produces organic herbs and spices located just outside the Cedar Rapids area. And mainly my job at Frontier is really focusing on employee development as well as employee retention. So this topic is just really interesting to me because it's been my life for the last year as I work with employees on how to adjust to their new roles and meet expectations.
My name is Scott Olson, and I'm with Skogman Commercial Group in downtown Cedar Rapids. And of course, I'm very interested in what's happening in the workplace because office is an important sector of my business. And besides being an architect, I also have the privilege of serving on the Cedar Rapids City Council. And we're, as a city, also concerned about what is the future of business in our community. So it's an exciting topic that we all need to be concerned about.
Absolutely. And again, thank you all for joining me this morning. And so there's a lot of ways we could approach this topic. I think we were talking before the show that, the pandemic has certainly impacted everybody in different ways. You have, and we were talking about, you have people that are frontline workers, medical workers, people working in retail, people, cleaning our streets and delivering food to our doors. And so in a lot of ways, people have been forced to have to work with each other, social distance, and, take precautions. And, that's a big deal. And we've certainly as a society tried to recognize that and just recognize those, as we call them, heroes, right, during this pandemic that have just kept society moving forward. For this particular show, we're kind of talking about, the impact on the workforce from a remote perspective, meaning we've got a large contingency of people now that are working from home, and kind of how that is, reshaped the workforce, reshaped commercial real estate, reshaped how we interact at home, how goods are delivered, etc. So before we get into it, I do want to just lay out a couple interesting statistics, and that is between 2005 and 2018, there was actually an increase of about 173% of workers working remotely. And that trend obviously went up drastically from the beginning of the pandemic there in 2019 to where we're at today here, March of 2021. So between those time periods, we actually saw an increase from 3.5% of our workers working remotely to 18%, which is an increase of 430%, which, with nearly 20% of your workforce working from home, that has a drastic impact on, commutes, impact on, again, commercial real estate, all kinds of things. So what I want to throw this out to our panelists here to get us started. Do you see this increase that has trended upward over the last, nearly 20 years and then spiked here with the pandemic? Do you see that increasing, leveling off, or decreasing, and why? So whoever wants to jump in on that would be great.
Well, I'll talk about what I'm seeing in the research I do in the real estate market. And the big issue is that a lot of companies are waiting to see the response from their employees that are working remotely as to whether they feel comfortable coming back to the office place And if they do they feel that the office is laid out, that even though we're getting the vaccines and things, that they can work safely at the office? And it really varies both with the job type. Some jobs are much easier to go remote, that people have been doing that for years. And because of the pandemic, our technology skills, whether that's Zoom or connections, and have dramatically increased. And so a lot of major corporations are evaluating here in the first half of 2020 how many of their employees they can move either in slow phases or permanently away from the office. And then at that time, they're going to be looking to potentially downsize their commercial space. So really, we're going to see it in mid to late 2021. We'll know where those statistics are at. And it's definitely going to go up, but I don't think it's going to go up as much as we currently have it at the present time.
Yeah, interesting. And Carrie, from where you're sitting there at Co-op, and I know you have maybe a diverse workforce there that can work remote, cannot. Where do you see your company heading? Do you kind of echo Scott's sentiment there that the decision's going to be probably made in 2021, and it is going to be kind of a hybrid strategy? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just talking to employees, way more employees than I thought. While a lot of people are thriving in this world, some people are really struggling with, being at home, not having that human interaction. So, and especially with us being a manufacturing company, half of our workforce has to be there on site. And so to work cross-functionally, I see us we haven't officially decided, but we'll probably go into some sort of hybrid model and trying to accommodate our, each individual employee's, unique perspective, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's right. And Alison, I don't know from your perspective, I know you're down at the university, if you have anything that you'd like to add to that, but go ahead.
Yes, I want to agree with Carrie and Scott with one small caveat. The digitalization of work is almost inevitable, right? It's been going on for a very long time. And of course, it accelerated because of the pandemic. So it's difficult to take out the effects of the pandemic with what was already happening. I would predict actually for the rest of 2021, because people have been so isolated because of the pandemic, as Carrie mentioned, because there hasn't been a lot of human interaction, that there's going to be a rush back to seeing people. And then after that, so interestingly, we've had a spike of remote work because of the pandemic. And I say once it eases up with vaccinations and once we reach herd immunity, I think there's going to be a lot more face-to-face interaction. But then I think we're going to go back to having remote and hybrid work space happening, accelerating again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know before the show, Scott, we were talking a little bit about, this idea of people kind of structuring their lives around not, remoting to work, and then companies kind of developing strategies around that. And I guess my question for you, Alison, is it would be frustrating for an employee, right, to say, well, or even be frustrating for employers to say, okay, who wants to come back to work? Well, we want to come back to work. No, we want to leave. It seems like on the one hand, that would have an impact on their personal life, right? Because they've structured everything around that. And companies also maybe had developed a real estate strategy that would accompany it. So I guess my question would be, does it make sense for these companies to just kind of finalize what they're going to do, communicate to these employees so people can kind of move on with their lives? Or do you honestly see it as more of this is going to be a back and forth for the next year? And maybe I didn't quite understand what you were saying there, but what's your response to that? I mean,
right. I think Scott is right. I think that they're waiting, right? I think that waiting to see what's going to happen. I think, like I said, there's going to be this almost artificial surge of wanting to get back to face because we have been restricted because of the pandemic. But then after that, there's a lot of positive impacts of having remote work or a hybrid model. There's a lot of cost savings to businesses, for example. There's a lot of flexibility and cost savings to employees that maybe can move somewhere else where real estate for their own personal lives is a little less. I think there's going to be not really a reckoning, but there's going to be a moment where there's this kind of sorting, right, of who's going to do what. Because like I said, there are actually some really positive impacts for both businesses and for individuals. There's also some negatives, and we'll talk about that, sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to. Before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about, Scott, you had shared kind of your recent market trends that Skogman had published in preparation for this episode. And I want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because you certainly have your pulse on that here locally, at least. And I'm sure it's a reflection of what's happening nationally. But one recent Forbes article I was looking at in researching this was that it stated here, and this was just within the last week, lower office space costs induced by the pandemic will themselves influence employers' planning by making office work more attractive, office space, more attractive and affordable. So are we seeing that trend as the supply of available commercial space increases?
Well, I think right now my study showed that there hasn't been much change, but there are numerous companies that are evaluating their future. Many of them have leases that have maybe 1, 2, 3 years go, so they just can't walk away from those leases. And so companies, the big surge they're thinking is a lot of companies that do decide to go mainly remote versus on-site will start renegotiating their leases and saying, and I've got 2 companies in town here that are already starting that, have hired consultants and are starting to negotiate in advance with their landlords saying, hey, we only have 3 years left on our lease, but we'll renew and do a 10-year lease, but we're only going to take 70% of our space. And so landlords have to decide what they're doing. And some are going to say, sorry, you got a lease for the whole building for 3 years, you're in it. But others are going to realize they don't know either what's going to happen. And I think the big change is going to be the type of employees that travel. And that study is showing that companies are now finding to upgrade technology that is substantially cheaper than having people on the road, flying, traveling. They can now do it by Zoom and other meetings. And I think that's going to even have a bigger impact than the loss of office space. But it's going to happen. We're going to see it. And in the case of Iowa, we have the second lowest unemployment in the nation. So if a company says you got to come back no matter what, they potentially could lose employees and not have anybody to replace them. In Iowa, especially in the Midwest, I think they're going to let employees sort of dictate what the future is, and that's going to happen during 2021, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think people have begun to see the value of working from home, and as I mentioned earlier, they've in some ways structured their lives around it, and it'll become a way to attract and retain, employees. And so, yeah, I kind of go what to you were saying, Alison, that it will kind of be a give and take for a while until we find that kind of equilibrium, right? What's similar to anything else that it attracts and retains employees. But there was something you mentioned, Carrie, when we were talking earlier before the show about, it wasn't something I really thought of, but it makes a lot of sense that when you do have the hybrid model that we're talking about here, right, where you have some working from home, some not working from home, you create kind of a disparity there, right? You have the have and the have-nots. You have people that are interacting face-to-face. That could increase the likelihood of promotion because you're now able to network, you're able to build these relationships, versus those that may be restricted to working from home. Have we seen any concern around that? And I can let the group jump in on this. Do we think that there's a way to kind of work around that? Do we see it as a serious concern?
I haven't personally seen it yet. When I brought it up, it was kind of in anticipation that this may be an issue. So companies who are all going to be virtual, everyone's going to be all on the same playing field. You're all communicating the same way. You're engaging with your manager the same way. But as we kind of said, we think most people are going to go to a hybrid model. And just naturally, you build strong relations with people that you're sitting right next to, that you see every day, that you see working, versus someone that you're just seeing in a computer maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, or even 1 or 2 hours a week. And so I think organizations need to get prepared for that, and they need to think about that. And so I don't have the solution. One of, I guess, the ideas is companies are really going to have to prepare their leadership on how they manage and maintain relationships, both virtually and for those on site, so that everyone does still have that equal opportunity, and you're not just I'm just closer to this person and I feel more comfortable with this person, that everyone is really being evaluated on the same skills and opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so before we kind of shift a little bit in this conversation, it seems like as we're talking here that there's kind of fundamentally, when it comes to the cost savings around having a large commercial real estate footprint, right, from a company perspective. And so it seems like there's a kind of a cost savings versus a productivity / innovation analysis that's going on here. Which wins in your opinion? And maybe we don't know yet, but that seems to be what companies are trying to decide with, okay, we got all this, we know people can work remotely. We know we can keep the business moving forward, but can we stay competitive? Can we innovate? Can we be as productive? Can we reach maximum production levels working remotely versus look at all this money we could save by getting rid of, millions of square foot of commercial overhead. So real estate overhead. So what's your thought there? And anybody can jump in.
Well, I'll start just a little bit. I just completed my market study that I do every 6 months, and what some of the different company or people that analyze real estate trends found that in the early stages, they found that they've not lost productivity for those functions that can be online versus in-house. And they were surprised that people were being as productive as possible. And part of that came from the fact that they were online all the time. They didn't walk out the door at 5 or 6 or 4 or whatever it is. They were reachable all the time. And some people were working into the night and doing more work because everything's online. And so, however, I think what the other study showed was that eventually people will burn out from that and they'll lose that one-on-one. I'm in the real estate business, and you build relationships, and you can't build solid relationships through a screen, and that you need to talk to people, and you have a whole different feel when you learn about them and work with them face to face. And so it's really going to be interesting, because I think certain businesses will do well, other businesses will not. And so it'll be interesting to see which companies really downsize space and end up everybody's working from home. And it's going to be quite a change.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And Alison, I want to come back to you on this as a sociologist. You hear, I don't know if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times, that you can't build good relationships via Zoom or via, whatever we're doing here, right? Versus that face-to-face interaction.
Right.
Is there good data to support that assertion? It sounds like it makes sense, but does it?
Yes, there is quite a bit of data that supports that assertion. And so this is the challenge for companies. You really need face-to-face interaction more than Zoom. You can build relationships with Zoom, but they're just not, the quality of the relationship is just not the same. Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to build a business where it requires a strong corporate culture and a lot of group cohesion between the workers, which leads to better performance, it's really hard to do that, vis-a-vis Zoom. And so I agree with Scott completely. Some businesses are going to be fine. I once studied, for example, a virtual organization composed of computer programmers from all around the world. Yeah. They were able to do, because of the nature of their work, they were able to do team projects with platforms that they created, and they're able to, do a terrific job in computer software. I think that's going to be a little bit harder for people, for example, that specialize in sales, or people that need certain kinds of input in order to create groups and in order to use groups for group goals that don't have tasks that are so separate. That's the thing about computer programming. You can really compartmentalize and separate the tasks, but there's some tasks that require everybody to be there to work on that. And that's going to be, those kind of tasks are really going to require more face-to-face interaction than Zoom. It's hard to do. We're an example of it tonight. We talk over each other by mistake.
Yeah.
We're not, it's just, the interaction is just not the same. And over time, it doesn't, like I said, contribute to a stronger corporate culture. And that's what some businesses are concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you do lose something when it comes to the culture. And absolutely. So I think as I'm thinking through this, there is, we've talked a little bit about the hybrid model and, people working from home a little bit, working in the office. But another kind of hybrid model there is this idea of, okay, we once had, 50,000 cubicles in this, giant office tower or whatever. Maybe we don't need that anymore, but we still want people to be able to get together as they need to. We still want people to be able to kind of enjoy the benefits of working remotely, et cetera. So maybe going back to you, Scott and Carrie, has that been a big discussion that you've seen where maybe companies are like, we still value the importance of getting together, so we're going to downsize our commercial space to maybe small, what you call maybe satellite office spaces where people can go at teams as they need to, can reserve some space. So on a Wednesday afternoon, we're going to go and we're going to have a work project or get together, et cetera, or maybe have a meeting where everybody gets together. Is that part of a growing strategy, do we think, to kind of that will emerge after this pandemic?
Well, I'll just talk as an architect and what I see in buildings, and that what used to be everybody going into cubes and small spaces and then having common areas is now on the out. And so architects and interior designers are now designing different types of space that separate the cubes. It allows for the hybrid model. And I'm a part owner in a historic office building that's over 100 years old. And all of our spaces pretty much are fixed offices. And that building's pretty much full, because people can work from fixed offices, shut the door, and then when they go out into the corridor or go to the restroom, they put a mask on, or to the break room, they have a mask on, but yet they can go back in and work with privacy and feel comfortable that they're safe. And I think what's going to happen, even Skogman companies just moved into a new office a little over a year ago, and it's mostly cubes and open spaces. They're now talking about potentially building more private offices and getting rid of the cubes, because agents feel more comfortable coming in and having privacy versus sitting out in an open area. Even though I like the feeling and the conversations, people are uncomfortable. And so, yes, we are going to see different office designs, and there's already designs on the internet for the new open office that spaces everything out. And it's really going to change the footprints of offices. And that's why the other reason why I think a lot of offices are going to downsize, because they're not going to be able to put as many people in the same space. So they're going to have to farm them out into online type things and be hybrid. So you come in, go back potentially, and not really meet all the time.
Yeah. Carrie, do you have thoughts on that? Excellent, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, so for Frontier, I have not personally been involved in any discussions where they're talking about what our future physical space looks like, but I have been involved in how do we accommodate with the space we have. So of course, Frontier, within the last few years, we actually remodeled our space to have an open concept and be collaborative.
Yeah,
So we do this, we're going to go backwards. But what we've done in the meantime is, for those who want to come on site or need to be on site because they need access to printers or whatever it may be, we kind of do it more on like a rotational basis so that we're still maintaining safe social distances and of course having our mask policies and stuff like that. So I'm not sure what direction Frontier is going to go with the future of that. I don't see us downsizing our space by any means. Probably aren't going to go be purchasing new real estate though. We'll just be able to maximize what we have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Creating a lot of headaches for architectures and
yeah.
office planners and
people that sell cube furniture. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So we only have a few minutes here left. So for a long time, we've talked about as a society the importance of that work-life harmony, right? I mean, or balance. I think the word harmony is used more these days. Have we stumbled across the answer to that? Is this the silver lining in the pandemic? And again, as I reiterated at the beginning of the show, there's a huge portion of our workforce that this is not an option, right, to work from home. So we are talking still about, about 1 in 5 workers that this would potentially impact. But for those, do we feel like this can give us that solution, that people are now going to have that kind of ability to work from home, work from the office as they need to, kind of on demand, and in many ways be able to be there for their kids in ways that they couldn't be before, have that home life. And I'm thinking of somebody that, a friend of mine who had a 4-hour commute every day, right? Which involved a car, a train, a subway, and a huge elevator, a long elevator ride, I should say. To me, that seems like archaic at this point and unnecessary. And but what's your thoughts?
I'll just say that what I think is going to happen is the people that are going to be successful in that type of way are your people that are established, experienced, are self-starters, are successful in what they do. The sad story is going to be for young people entering a profession that don't have mentorship of older people, because the older people they've already gotten their positions, their management, they've got their promotions, and so the companies aren't going to fire them, they're going to let them work from home. But what happens if you're a starting employee? How do you get into the system and try to promote yourself when you're sitting behind a screen?
Interesting. Alison?
Yeah, so a lot of studies show that your productivity is great, just as your quality of your work is just as good remote. But one of the negative effects is that they have something called spillover, and that is all of the stress and everything associated with your work spills over into other aspects of your life that you wouldn't necessarily have spill over. I mean, for example, right here, right, we're looking at personal life and in ways that we wouldn't necessarily do that. But on a more serious note, there can be real stresses there and challenges, especially for people who have kids. So, it's like, again, it's that give and take that you were talking about, Alan. On the one hand, you can be home for kids and you don't have to commute 4 hours. On the other hand, I shudder to think that the expectation is 100% all day long productivity, the way Scott describes, because those people with kids that simply can't do that. Even after the pandemic, they're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And there's, we alluded to this at the beginning, and we're almost done here, but we're creatures of habit as humans, right? And there is, in some sense, probably a little nostalgia for going to work and being around people and having that structure in your life, right? Having that break, kind of hard line between your home and your personal.
Right.
And in fact, it was funny. I was reading something the other day where some people missed their commute so much that they actually get up in the morning, do their commute, and then drive right back to the house.
Actually, and that's right, because we're so used to these boundaries that we have between, and it doesn't mean that it can't happen with remote work, but we have to kind of renegotiate the scripts of doing that, because it's not really clear how effective that's going to work. Again, like I said, especially for people with children.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, it's really hard to see how how that's going to unfold, and it seems like and just kind of closing here, we've talked a lot about, and just a couple quick statistics here that I thought was interesting is that people who work remotely earn $4,000 more per year on average. I thought that was interesting. $11,000 is how much companies expect to save annually for each person that works remotely. 30% of remote workers save upward to $5,000 a year. So there's a lot of things. I bring that up just because there is a lot to consider here, right? What I said earlier, there's the lack of productivity, or there's the cost savings, there's the work-life balance, there's the corporate culture, there, on and on and on, right? That companies are going to have to, and employees are going to have to try to figure out. But it'll work itself out. It'll come back to that equilibrium that we mentioned earlier, and I'm sure it'll change again, right? As we continue to evolve and as the technology progresses.
Like Carrie was saying, companies are trying to figure this out, just like we're talking about it. They're trying to figure it out because they can't afford to lose key employees. And so they're going to let people work from home, do hybrid, come back to the office. It's really going to be interesting, depending on the company and the type of business you're in, what that culture will end up being. And I think there'll be a lot more studies done. So,
Absolutely. Hey, guys, it has been a great show. This is interesting stuff. It impacts me directly. It's something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. I appreciate each one of you's expertise. It's been great, fascinating. I hope our viewers enjoyed it as well. And we hope you have a great and wonderful Sunday. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Good morning.